Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. Um, we have a very important topic to talk about tonight. Um, just bear with me a moment while I get everything set up and we will get into it. This is a very past the date it happened reflection, I want to say, on something our friend Suris the Skeptic um, posted. So let me start by saying this first. Suris the Skeptic did a video couple of months ago called "Autism is Caused by the Devil." Now, Brian and I have a lot to say about this subject, but it's very important to us. Oh, hold on. To be clear, we're not criticizing what Suris had to say. I agree with what Suris said almost entirely, except for the fact that I believe in God and Suris does not, which is not relevant to this discussion. But I have a different take on this than Suris does, and Brian has a different take on this than Suris does. So this is our response to the video that Suris is responding to more than anything else. I linked to Suris's video for two reasons. First, I don't know the original source. I don't really care because of number two. I don't want the pastor that this is in response to get any views off of my channel. Do not mistake me. Suris has a great video on the subject. I linked it in the description. I highly recommend you go check that out when you're done here. But he deserves the clicks and views. The idiot pastor does not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he went to all the trouble of drawing himself as an animated person wearing a Sonic costume. So,
yeah, one of the many things.
Much more entertaining than the original pastor video.
So before we get into this, and we're going to get into this, let's do the intros for anyone who doesn't know the two of us. My name is Kevin Mears. I'm a demonologist and paranormal investigator and a Christian, as you might guess from what we've said so far. I'm also the Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am joined by my friend and co-host,
Brian McKinley, author of vampire thriller novels and general person interested in lots of stuff.
Yeah. And we're here to talk about I loathe to use the term, a Christian video that proposes the notion that the condition known as autism, or more properly autism spectrum disorder, is caused by demonic possession. This is disgusting on many levels. I'm going to start with the simplest one first, because Brian and I have a lot more to say about the second part. So I have a friend I've talked about on this, or I had, I should say, since he's no longer with us. A dear friend I've talked about many times on this channel by the name of Father Joseph Rose. He was an Antioch Orthodox priest. He was one of my mentors. He was a wonderful human being. And he had a wonderful saying that I've internalized and is a major part of my personal belief system, which is God does not make junk. Now, the pastor in question says a version of this, specifically, my God does not make junk. In the most despicable way I've ever heard. This is what, as much as anything, infuriates me. Because when I say God does not make junk, I mean that every person on this earth has inherent value. That if you're suffering from depression, if you're suffering from suicidal ideations, you are important, you are worthwhile. When this idiot of a pastor uses it in his video, he's saying God does not make junk, so God cannot have created autism. That's wrong. First of all, if you're saying that people are born with autism, and as I understand it, the science says that, yeah, it is an inherent condition that you're born with. There definitely seems to be a genetic component.
Yeah.
Does that mean you were we'll get into the demonically possessed in a minute. Did God make you this way? Suris says in his video, and I agree with him. Yeah, God did. That isn't a bad thing. That doesn't make you junk. I've had many dear friends who are autistic. I was engaged to an autistic woman. They aren't junk. No one is born junk. People choose to make themselves junk by saying loathsome things like this. But that's a product of their choices, not how they were born. I don't care if you're born autistic. I don't care if you were born with bipolar or chronic depression. That does not make you junk. And that's never how that sentence should be used. It is obscene to me to hear it. This is what I watched this video a week ago. I'm still angry. Do you want to add to that, Brian?
Sure. Yeah, I'll come at it from the other, more similar to Soros, in that I'm a more or less atheist-leaning agnostic. So I don't take any kind of spiritual element to that or to this discussion, but at the same time, even from just a purely rational, obvious thing, okay, nature, you could argue, does or does not make junk. There are things that work, there are things that don't. There are things that work better than other things. It's all out there. And it's all pretty much, as valid as anything else. So it's really our perceptions and our judgments and our values that make us say, well, this is better than this, or this is good, this is not good. Nature doesn't care. Nature throws out a bunch of random combinations and mutations and just sees what works. What ends up continuing on. What lasts a long time, what doesn't last a long time. There's no real judgment there. Is autism, a good thing, a bad thing in our current society? Sure. Aspects of it, when it's severe, especially, make it more difficult for a person with that to function the way we want them to in our society. But as we're coming to think or reflect a little better, that's a very ableist view. We shouldn't be judging people based on how useful or how productive they can be to our society and what they can give us. Either you believe everybody has an inherent value or you don't. And that's going to make all the difference. I mean, I just thought it was funny that this guy decides to pick out autism. I think it's because it's kind of the vogue thing after the vaccines cause autism scare and all that. Autism's become kind of all the rage for people to poke at. But I mean, okay, so what about cerebral palsy? Somebody born with a condition that makes it difficult for them to speak or move or control their motor functions. Okay, well, where's that in his judgment of God or his belief? It's like you could poke 1,000 holes in all of that. And speaking as I have said, or not said on this channel, but I am an autistic person. I have a part of that spectrum in me. It's not obvious. It hasn't shown itself in ways that have been really obvious to other people, and that's given me a certain advantage. I have nephews and a brother who also have autism. One of the nephews is very obviously autistic. The other not so much. He's a little more what we like to go into as normal. So, I've seen all of it, and it's just different wiring. Some people have a naturally short temper. Other people are just naturally patient. We don't really know what goes into forming all of that, whether it's nature, nurture, genetics, upbringing. It's all a mix. There's everything combines into where you eventually end up. So, you know, the whole autism is demon possession. That was a new one to me. I thought that was funny. Never heard that one before. Let me just
Sadly, I can't say the
I'll
same.
just end with because it's an interesting intellectual bit. The root word of autism, where the term comes from, is Greek in origin, and it comes from awe, meaning self. And essentially, it was coined in 1908 by Eugen Bleuler, which makes me think of Ferris Bueller, but probably a German, probably sounds like from his name, but yeah, the term autism essentially translates into a morbid or unnatural self obsession, as in a person who intellectually retreats into themselves. And it's not entirely unfounded. There's a great deal of self in an autistic mindset. You spend a lot of time in your own head. You're not necessarily as social as other people, but it's just, I just thought I'd throw that out there to add into the conversation.
And I very much think it's worth adding. And I've never been diagnosed autistic. I don't have that perspective on this. It's one of the reasons you're such a particular. In general, you're a very valuable part of the show, but you're particularly valuable here because you bring a perspective I simply can't, because it's not my life experience. But I will say this: like this idea that autism is connected with the demonic or isn't new. Sadly, Martin Luther, and I don't mean Reverend King. I mean the original Martin Luther nailed the theses to the door of the church. Actually commented at one point about meeting a boy that he claimed had no soul. This is back in the 16th century. It's considered by some one of the first recorded examples of autism. We also know from his other writings he had a general view that disabilities were caused by sin, which is also nonsensical.
Yeah. I also tend to think that some of the stories of like changeling children being swapped out, I think that may have been an early explanation in some cultures for autism.
I think you're absolutely right. Changelings throughout history have been a convenient excuse to get rid of people that were inconvenient. Certainly, people that were a little outside of social norms, or a lot outside when you get to the lower functioning forms of autism. I could definitely see that being labeled as a changeling, knowing changeling folklore. And yeah, I hate to say it, but the reality is people would have seen it as demon possession. And okay, let's get into this notion of it being demonic possession. You cannot cure autism. Exorcism is not, you cannot drive the demon of autism out of a child. The idea is idiotic. The idea is not biblical. That'd be like saying that Jesus didn't just heal leprosy, he cast the demon of leprosy out of people. And the Bible doesn't say that. There's a distinction between between illness and spiritual ailment like possession. And as an investigator, I've run into this idea before. I have a sister who used to do a lot of work with autistic children and knew a mother who thought their autistic children were possessed by demons. And it's a very scary idea to me because this is a sort of mentality that leads to trying to beat the devil out of children,
Hmm.
or, or trying to burn the witch because these people fall outside of social norms. I say that was the biggest.
Yeah, I'd love to ask this particular guy. Okay, so where is that line between a natural disorder of the human condition and demonic possession? Like, should somebody with bad eyesight, have the demon of poor eyesight driven from them? Like asthma, be gone, asthmatic demon. Like
As
what's a natural failing, and then what is grounds for demonic possession in his eyes? It just seems really arbitrary.
and Brian makes an excellent point, and it's a question I get asked, and it's a fair question. Let me be absolutely clear. I consider this a completely fair question to ask anyone who believes in demonic possession, particularly anyone like myself who says, yes, demon possession exists, but there's a clear line between demon possession and mental illness. You could be an autistic person could be possessed, but they're not autistic. But if you cast the demon out, they're still going to be autistic. One does not relate to the other. It does not make you more vulnerable. It does not make you a bigger target. That all is a ridiculous load of nonsense. If you want to know how to tell the difference between demon and mental illness, here's a real good test. If someone is socially awkward, maybe a little developmentally challenged, or gets upset very easily, those are signs of something psychological. That's time to take them to qualified medical professionals. If someone can throw objects around the room without touching them, if a 12-year-old child with no formal training suddenly can communicate fluently in Latin or Aramaic or another dead language, now we're moving into the territory of something else is going on. 12-year-olds don't spontaneously become fluent in dead languages. No natural explanation exists for somebody being able to throw a refrigerator across the room. And I think you, Brian, is an atheist. They're atheist leaning, and most other materialists would agree with me that if you could, I'm not saying I can, but if I could verifiably demonstrate that a child could throw a refrigerator from one end of the room to another without laying so much as a finger on it, and there are no wires involved, we've walked out of the realm of mental disorder. Can we agree on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once you eliminate the plausible and the possible, all that is left is the truth. So,
so there's my dividing line. Can there be borderline cases? Yes, absolutely. But here's the thing. Demons are creatures of pride. It'll always reveal itself in time. And realistically, I'm not going to get into how, because if someone has a demon in them and you do this and you're not very careful about it, you're going to get hurt. But there are ways that someone like myself, who knows what the heck they're doing, can verify it. That again moves the subject out of maybe psychological, maybe not, into something's going on that science doesn't have an adequate explanation. And that's what I look for. Mental illness, and I don't like to think of autism. I mean, technically it qualifies, but when I think of autism, I think it's more complicated than just to label it something the way you would label bipolar or something like that, because it's a spectrum.
Yeah,
you have high functioning people, you have low functioning people. It's not a simple, straightforward thing. And hi, Chris Palermo. Thank you for joining us. One of our regulars showed up. She says she hopes we're having a lovely weekend. I'm having a very nice weekend, although I wish it wasn't Monday tomorrow. I don't want to go back to work. Other than that,
Yeah,
things are good.
yeah, I agree with you about autism. Why it's not just a psychological or mental disorder, because I'm almost certain, I haven't looked to see, but I'm almost certain there's got to be a physiological component, which there is in some things like bipolar, depression, things like that. You have chemicals that aren't produced in proper quantities or are overproduced. But like I said in my first thing, there's something about autism that's just it's so fundamentally different. It just makes
Yeah.
it's like the way your entire brain is wired, your patterns of thinking, the way you view the world, all of that becomes affected. And I don't I think that's something beyond a what we would just call a disorder, because a disorder is something that takes an otherwise regular standard person and causes a malfunction, but can be, addressed or fixed. Autism is almost like I've seen people compare it with computer languages, where it's like, most people are running on DOS, and then autism is like Java or something. Like it's just a different set of
Operating system.
operating system and parameters, and or Mac and PC, if you want to, go that way. But it just seems to me like, yeah, there's something much more fundamental in the makeup of autism, and maybe it's an evolutionary thing. Who knows?
Well, I think you make an excellent point, and it's kind of what I'm getting at, is that if people we have this category of what we define as normal, and if you stray too far out of the category, we tend to label it a disorder. And autistic people clearly, like you said, it's like having a different operating system. The way that you process the world around you isn't the same way that I process the world around me. In a fairly large degree of difference. It's not. I mean, everyone processes the world differently from everybody else to some degree, but there's a noticeable change. Where I sometimes find it difficult to say disorder because it reminds me of something from my own childhood, my own youth, of the fact that I've always been labeled as having learning disabilities, and particularly when you look at how I relate to math, it gets defined as a disability because I don't process numbers the way that normal mind, well, like I'm supposed to process numbers. But the thing I've found growing up over time, and funny enough, playing games like Dungeons and Dragons were a big part of helping me realize this, is I see them differently. Differently isn't the same as wrong.
Yeah, it's like being left-handed instead of right-handed, or dyslexic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, some great minds throughout history and today have been fallen on the spectrum. Dan Aykroyd, for example,
oh yeah,
considers himself an example of autism spectrum. There's no proof, and the diagnosis wouldn't exist for centuries after he died. But a lot of historians and psychologists think that Isaac Newton and Galileo both showed signs of autism in their
yeah.
writings.
Possibly Octavian, later
Hmm.
Augustus, the first Roman emperor. From a lot of contemporary accounts, he supposedly, a lot of people think he had some symptoms or tells.
It wouldn't surprise me. But again, we didn't have a word for it at the time. Autism isn't something new; it's something that's been with us. And again, we rush to label different as bad, which isn't accurate, and it isn't fair because lots of people, again, Newton may have been autistic. He's considered one of the greatest minds of human history. You know, there have been rumors that Einstein might have been as well, which I think is a lot. There's a lot more debate over. But again, one of the greatest minds of human history, and whether he fell on the spectrum or not, there's no denying Einstein saw the world in a fundamentally different way than most people.
Yeah,
He came up with a lot of useful ideas out of it, so we call him a genius.
Yeah, so much comes down to whether what you do is useful or not. Are you an idiot or are you a useful idiot? Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of question there as well, just by virtue of the fact that just because the idea seems silly now doesn't mean in 20 years we're not going to find something and go, oh, wait, they were right all along.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like Tesla,
Well, the example I was thinking of was Gregor Mendel. For 100 years, his ideas of inheritance were ignored and written off.
Yeah.
And then somebody found one of his papers and went, we've been wrong this whole time. Darwin, who is is very much a great mind, in many ways an important figure in the history of biology, was wrong about genetics.
Yeah.
And this minor priest and monk was right. Because somebody went and looked at it and, oh, wait, evidence.
Yeah. Often it takes our science a little while to catch up to human creativity.
Yeah. This has been actually one of our more successful shows so far. By the way, we've had 7 views altogether with an average watch time of 7 minutes.
Wow. That's like Super Bowl ratings for us. Grading on a curve.
I'll take what I can get, man.
Yeah, no, it's better than nobody watching us.
Yeah. Also, I think for you as well, at least once you were aware of it, but for me, for the last week, this has been something I've been looking at and like, I need to say something. I wouldn't care if nobody would ever watch this video. As a Christian, as someone for whom particularly the idea that God does not make junk is a very important of my personal belief system.
Yeah.
I had to say something. And I'll say this. The inherent idea I'm advocating for, I couch it in religious terms, but it's not an inherently religious idea. It's also very much an idea in terms of secular humanism. Yeah. That humans have value.
Yeah. I mean, it's right there, the whole inalienable human rights kind of thing in the Declaration of Independence or Constitution. Yeah, I mean, it's an important fundamental idea that often gets overlooked, is that you shouldn't necessarily have to earn your place in society or your right to exist. It should be a given.
Exactly. There's a ethical philosopher I'm fond of. I don't think he's a realistic basis for personal morality, although I think he has a good starting base for law, which is Immanuel Kant.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
Who had 2 basic ideas about morality, one of which I think everyone should adopt, and the other one I think really only works for law. The one that is a matter of law is this idea known as deontology, which is that an act can only be considered ethical if you could elevate it to a universal law. So it is never permissible to lie, because a world where everyone lied all of the time wouldn't function. Murder, same thing. And it's a very black and white idea of ethics.
Yeah.
And like I said, for laws, I think it works pretty well because, for making a broad law, don't murder people is a good broad law. But in terms of taking human life, there is shades of gray.
Yeah, you always need to consider the circumstances and the factors of each individual case. That's why the trial system is so important.
Yeah. But it's a good starting point to say, does this make sense on a universal level? If it doesn't, you probably should rethink it. The other idea that he suggested that doesn't get as much attention, but I think is a really good one, is a interrelated two-part principle, one of which says that to be ethical, you should always treat human beings as having worth as an end to themselves, not simply as a means to an end. And also that all human beings are possessing of infinite self-worth.
Hmm.
And that is like, no, I think if you start by that idea, you're in a good space morally and ethically.
Sure.
But it kind of goes again. I think hopefully goes into what we're talking about. On the other hand, I sort of feel like I ran off on a tangent. But
we've wandered into philosophy a little bit.
But philosophy does apply here. I mean, this isn't just a scientific, it's not just a religious thing. It's not just a scientific thing. It's where the two meet. And it's where philosophy comes in because.
So a point that Suris made in his video that I think is important to at least bring up again for anybody watching just us is the worst part of this guy doing this video is not just, I mean, because he just out there saying it on a street corner or whatever, and who cares? It's not affecting anybody. It's not doing anything. But the realization that this guy has a congregation, possibly a large one, that listens to him and is influenced by him. He apparently has a position on a school board or some kind of educational. Yeah. And so his beliefs and these ideas that he's putting out could very well be affecting, people's children in a way that they would not want. And that's where the real danger is the kind of influence that somebody with these kind of ideas can have.
I agree completely. I completely forgot that point of sources, and it's a really important point to bring up. Like the danger is in how these ideas spread more than anything. Because if one lone person has an insane idea, we call that insanity.
Yeah.
It's when other people start to agree that it becomes even more dangerous. Not that one lone crazy person isn't dangerous.
Yeah.
Reality.
And in my opinion, if enough crazy people believe the idea, it becomes a religion.
And for the record, I don't think religion is insanity. Undeniably, religion is not insanity. But that doesn't make you wrong either. There are plenty of completely insane ideas, including at least a couple that might have started as jokes or bets, like we were talking about earlier today, that be turned into religions.
Yeah.
Or cults or.
Mm-hmm.
And it also comes into a cornerstone point, I think, for this show throughout its history and of my philosophy of life in general, which is question what people tell you for the love of God. Question what, if somebody says they're a pastor, if somebody says they're a prophet, if someone says the Bible says, blind faith is one of the most dangerous things in the world.
Yeah, that I definitely agree on.
And for that matter, to get a little Christian about it, Jesus said to test people. Don't just take their word for it. And throughout the Gospels, one of the things I always respect most, I think is most respectable about the character of Jesus as presented, we can argue if it's how accurate to reality it is or not.
Sure.
Is that he didn't turn away people who questioned him. He was sometimes a little snarky with his answer when people were trying to get sneaky, but he gave them an answer.
Yeah.
And I think
it's the people that won't let you question them that you know that they're dangerous because obviously their ideas can't hold up to
scrutiny,
to any kind of real scrutiny. So they're just going to bulldoze their way through it.
Because I think I've made clear, and I'm sure you know, yes, I'm a person who believes in God, but I speak for me. I don't claim to speak for God on anything. I don't want the bloody responsibility of saying that I speak for God. And why anyone would is beyond me.
Yeah.
For God's sakes, in the Bible, if you claim to be a prophet, which means you literally speak for God, if you made a mistake, they put you to death. In some interpretations, God would just strike you dead for speaking out of turn and claiming to speak for him. I don't want that. And so why? You'll see. Again, corner of belief of the show from 7 years ago when I started it is, go look it up. I linked Suris's video in the description. I absolutely recommend everybody go check it out. It's a good video. See what he has to say. See what the pastor in question has to say, and make up your own dang mind. Don't rely on me telling you what to think.
Yeah.
Granted, because as you know, it's the fundamental assumption of this show. My assumption is that my viewers are smart enough to see through this BS without me telling them.
Yeah.
Because all the people that I've ever talked to that watch, they're pretty smart people. And this is very stupid.
That's always kind of been the problem with this sort of thing. Like even the many types of videos and stuff that I watch on YouTube, it's you watch it and you agree with it and you're like, oh, those are such good ideas. And the sad part is you come to the realization, the people that really need to see this and hear these ideas are the ones that are never going to be willing to sit down and give that, whatever video a chance. They won't let those ideas get into their head.
Or they'll respond just to tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah, well, that's part of it.
Those responses already.
Oh yeah, they're just looking for the chance to make the argument back. It's not really penetrating into their mind. They just are ready to kick back some pre-programmed response.
Yeah, somebody in a recent comment commented on how sad he was you and I weren't saved. Like, bold of you to make assumptions, my man.
Yeah. Well, what's actually funny is it doesn't seem like it, but even I was in fact saved way back decades ago when I was a kid. I had a friend that was a very devout church-going Christian, and he sat down with me one afternoon and talked to me seriously about the Bible and Jesus, and asked if I wanted to be saved and this and that. And I don't remember the exact, but it was your basic kind of evangelical sort of thing. Like,
we've all heard the basic idea before.
Yeah, soft evangelical. And I went along with it. I was like, yeah, all right, sure. My thinking back then and even today, it's like, that's why I don't get angry when somebody says, like, God bless you, or or whatever in response to something I've done or whatever. It's like, you know what? Can't hurt. If it's not real, it has no effect on my life. If it is real, who knows?
Well, for me, and you're aware of this, so we've known each other long enough, I think, but listeners may not be aware of it because I present slightly differently here than I do face to face. Face to face, I'm only likely to say to somebody, God does not make junk, if I know that you believe in God. Because the idea of saying that to somebody is to offer comfort, not just ram my religion in their face.
Yeah.
I don't say that to atheists, because if you don't believe in God, At best, it's a nice, meaningless nothing. At worst, it's an insult. But although I think the general idea behind it, which you and I agree on, and I think probably most other people agree on, which is that everyone has value.
Yeah.
Whether you invoke God in it or not. I mean, again, the only reason I'm doing this video is because I was offended that somebody would take that idea that everyone has value and pervert it in such a disgusting way.
Yeah, it's really a terrible message to choose to make a point of going out and saying. It's like you believe, in your heart of hearts, you can believe whatever you want about certain types of people. I mean, you can believe that's I feel that's horribly wrong and whatnot and blah blah blah. But you know, anytime you're going to go out and make a big public proclamation or statement, what impact are you trying to have? What do you think you're accomplishing by doing that? Are you trying to educate people? Are you just trying to make yourself feel better? Are you trying to convert people to your way of thinking?
Are you trying to make them feel worse?
Yeah, are you just trying to hurt certain people? It's like, I mean, and it's a very specific and deliberate question that I think everybody should ask. I try to ask that of myself before I go about doing any kind of major thing, like even so little as posting a message on Facebook where I will often post about politics or topics or whatever. I always try to have some thought about, okay, what am I posting here? What am I actually saying? How might it be interpreted? And what kind of effect am I actually looking to have? Am I just looking to get a couple of high fives from the other, Facebook liberal friends that agree with me,
or score points,
or score some points,
yeah.
do some virtue signaling,
Yeah.
Or am I really trying to make a statement hoping that someone who believes differently than me will read what I say and maybe just consider it for a minute,
See, I need to get better about that because that's a much better approach. And I have too much fondness for trying to score points off of people I consider stupid. Granted, I will say I think many of these people deserve to be treated like they're stupid. Certain pastors we've been talking about for nearly an hour, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in general, I should try to be a little more charitable.
Well,
I will say
the problem generally, what I feel is the thing that contributes to the toxic culture of the internet is you have too many people that are just trying to, win the argument.
Yeah.
They're not trying to spark any sort of reflection or an idea. And I made the choice to sort of go away from that. There's a lot of times where I could make a smug, snarky response to, certain things. But if I don't feel like I really have something to say in response, then I try not to. I don't always succeed. I don't pretend.
We're all human, for God's sakes.
Yeah, but I try to approach everything as an opportunity to educate, if not the person I'm addressing, maybe the random people that are reading the comments in the exchange. Who knows? You might get lucky with one person that thinks about what you said and the point you made, and
See, I'm good with that here. I'm not as good with that in other online spaces. But here I make the effort to go, wait, is this really what I want to say? But there is one thing I wanted to share with folks lately, because I've been thinking a lot about my own worldview and what being Christian means to me and what message I want to spread to other people. And I've come up with a basic philosophy that while I would not try to force it on anybody, I think the world will be a better place if the rest of you all just agree with me. And it's two basic principles. One is try to be a better person today than you were yesterday. Because None of us are perfect. We all do things we didn't mean to. We all say things we didn't mean to. We all get angry and upset, and that's okay. And I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm just saying think about what you could have done better and try to do it.
Sure.
The other point is this: leave the world better than you found it, or at least try to leave the world better than you found it. Doesn't involve God. You don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to do what I say. But I think the world's a better place if people try to do those two things. And because we all have different senses of morality and right and wrong and things like that. Who should judge if you're doing better today than you were yesterday? Start with yourself.
Yeah.
People are their own harshest critics. If you think you did everything right yesterday, you didn't make a single mistake, more power to you, although I suspect you're wrong. Just because
or a narcissist.
Yeah, which would still fall into you're wrong.
Yeah.
But if that isn't enough, that basic sense of morality, and the next good place to start is there's a billion other ways to say it, but I'll use the Christian way. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's said in every religion, in every major philosophy, in one way or another. Empathy, compassion.
I believe I follow that. I try to, and I believe in that, regardless of its religious origin. It's still
it doesn't
just
need a religious origin.
It's a good one sentence morality. It's a very basic, but it covers a lot, and it's a good guideline.
And when I say I think we should all try to follow the things I just said, I'm not trying to judge people. I don't have any business judging you. I don't live up to these 3 points I just made as well as I think I should. I'm just saying the world would be a happier place if people focused on trying to be kinder, trying to be more compassionate, more empathetic towards each other, and trying to clean up the mess that we've made. Be it the environmental mess, political mess, the educational mess. Oh, God, I could do another video right now just on Oklahoma and Louisiana bringing the Bible into schools. Thank God. Did you hear the specific brilliant idea Oklahoma had? They got shut down. As I understand, it kind of got shut down hard.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, Oklahoma was like the head superintendent of schools for the state or whatever, basically issued a memo telling every school, public school in Oklahoma, that they had to start teaching from the Bible.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, Louisiana put the 10 Commandments up everywhere, which is great. But it's like, I think if you're going to mandate that, then the teacher should also be mandated to point out all the ways in which everything fails to live up to any of those commandments.
You know what, though? Here's my bigger problem with that. A bunch of the commandments aren't really good ethical rules, and several of them directly violate the First Amendment.
Yeah, they're kind of out of date in a lot of cases.
Well, case in point, thou shalt not murder. It's a good rule. No notes. Don't steal. Mostly a good rule. The obvious exception being, the Les Miserables stealing a loaf of bread to feed the starving children. Is that actually unethical? I would say no.
Right.
On the other hand, in what way does worshiping a god other than Yahweh hurt other people? In what way does not taking Saturdays, not Sundays, because the Sabbath is Saturday, but in what way does not taking Saturday off hurt other people?
Yeah.
The one way I've seen people try to turn that into something sensible is that you should take at least one day out of the week for yourself. And you know what? I agree with that. People should get days off. Not a controversial idea to most people. But saying it has to be this one specific day and you have to spend it in church the whole time instead of doing something else is not a good law. Or a good
it's not even practical in application. It's like there are so many things that like a farm. If you're on a farm, if you take an entire day and don't do any of the basic chores or maintenance on certain aspects of the farm and the animals, you're going to suffer for it. It's not going to go well for you, you know?
And in point of fact, talking about the Sabbath, Jesus specifically contradicted that one. Because he said, in examples of, okay, my followers are hungry. It's a Sabbath day, but we're going to collect some food. Why? Because we need to eat. We're humans.
Yeah.
And there's an idea in Judaism that Christianity really needs to adopt, called Pekush Negev, in which almost all of the 613 laws, because it's not just 10,
yeah.
can be accepted in a life or death situation.
Yes.
And many rabbis even go further and say, if you're a doctor and you have a patient that will not explicitly isn't going to die, but is going to suffer pain and misery on the Sabbath, work on the Sabbath. Because that human life and the human quality of life matters more.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good position. I think human well-being is where you start.
And speaking of the one commandment, though, did you ever notice that a lot of Christians completely miss the weird loophole that exists in that thou shalt not have any other gods before me? He's explicitly saying that there are other gods, that he's not the only one. He's just saying, I'm the best one. Go with me, but it's right there in the commandment.
In point of fact, he's not even saying that. You're on the right track.
Yeah.
But there's a step further to it. The idea specifically in the Old Testament, in the early parts of the Old Testament that we're talking about, is that this God Yahweh made a covenant with the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Now, in a covenant, it's an agreement where both sides have responsibility. God says, I will protect your nation. I will lead you to the land of milk and honey. And here's what you need to do in return. And that first commandment is, I'm your God. You're going to worship me because I'm the one you made this covenant with. Not Zeus, not Thor, me. The early Jewish people weren't monotheists. They were what's called henotheism. In henotheism, Yahweh is the God of the Jewish people. Baal is the God of the Canaanite people. If you're a Jewish person, you do not worship Baal, you worship Yahweh. If you're a Canaanite, you worship Baal, not Yahweh.
Yeah.
Again, with the same idea. And again, technically it doesn't say there aren't other gods, that you just worship the one God. Or technically, really, it says the one God is on top of the food chain, as it were.
Yeah.
Which is
I just find it amusing that argument almost never gets brought up or any kind of airplay.
There's a whole discussion we could have there that ties into the idea of divine counsel instead of just a single God, which is mentioned in the book, in the Psalms and some other places in the Bible, that talks about demigods. It talks about these divine figures other than Yahweh. But that is really an episode unto itself.
Yeah, no, I think we should definitely do like a misconceptions about the Bible and stuff. I think you'd have a great time with that, and I'd find it very entertaining and informative.
Oh, and there's tons of things even people who think they know the Bible get wrong.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
And that's even before you start getting into the linguistic problems. Well, one that I keep tripping up, I've been tripping up people on lately, and I none of them have, in my opinion, a good answer to. So it usually is agreed among Christians that God opposes abortion. Yes? Can you, next time you talk to a pro-life person, ask them which verse condemns abortion, because there isn't one.
Yeah, exactly.
The only attempt I've ever seen anyone make to try to justify that, other than, the Bible says thou shalt not kill. And it's like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of exceptions to that in the Bible.
Exactly.
But the only other argument I've heard made is that abortion didn't exist yet. And no, we know for a fact that the earliest recorded abortion, and they were definitely older than this, but the first one somebody wrote down was about 1,000 years before the birth of Christ in Egypt.
Yeah.
They
had lots of medical ways to do that.
And a religious one. We'll get into this when we do the Bible misconceptions, but there's a whole section in the book of Numbers that lays out a ritualized form of abortion.
Fun.
You can debate that, and people do, but basically it kind of lays out, okay, if you think a woman's unfaithful, you make her eat these specific herbs as part of this ritual, and if she was unfaithful, she'll miscarry the baby. That's an abortion.
Yep.
It's an abortion with religious steps added to it. And that's what the Bible says to do in this situation.
Yep.
But we're coming up near the end of the episode. Folks, I am sorry that we have been absent. Real life keeps getting in the way. I want to try to get back to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday nights. I think because after being angry for the last hour, I want to have a little bit of fun. How about we plan doing Ninja next week?
We could go for Ninja.
Yeah, next week we're going to talk about Ninja. They're paranormal adjacent, and it's a lot of fun. So, everybody wash your black pajamas, sharpen up your ninja toe, and we're going to talk about Ninja next week. Before we wrap up for the night, I want to just quickly encapsulate what we've had to say on the original topic, which is 1, everyone has worth, or to put it into religious terms, God does not make junk. That includes that means that people on the autistic spectrum are not junk. 2, demons don't cause autism. Don't be stupid. And 3, Suris the Skeptic already did a great video on this called Autism Caused by the Devil. It is linked in the description below. It's a great video, 10 out of 10. Suris has a really wonderful channel, Suris the Skeptic. I highly recommend you go check that out and see what he had to say. Suris, if you happen to see this by any chance, great video. This is my addition to it, not me saying you were wrong, as I hope we've been very clear about. That's going to do it for me, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, do you have any final thoughts of the sort you want to add before we do the good night?
No, I think we got it.
I do too. I didn't want to just say okay, good night, and not leave you the chance. But that's going to do it for us tonight. Tune in next week when we will be talking about those pesky ninja. Are they behind you right now? Until then, this is Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator in the Paranormal Encyclopedia, saying good night and God bless.
And Brian McKinley saying keep your fangs sharp.
Good night, everybody.